everybody the night before Memorial Day. It is 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Mountain, and it's episode 26 of What's the Scoop. Joined today by my buddy Trevor. How you doing, my guy?
Doing well, Scoops. I really appreciate you having me on, and can't wait to get into some of our discussions and some of our topics that we have because it's been a pretty crazy week, as it always is in the sporting industry.
Absolutely, as that's very true. First off, just want to, like I said, thank you for coming on. Feel very fortunate that throughout these last four shows this past week, I've been able to have at least one collaboration with each of the four horsemen over at Rocky Mountain Sports Network. Got to see uh, on Denver Bronco Roundup, got to see Keith and Jody. Got to see you tonight and started the week off with Mr. Dutchy last week. So feel very excited and fortunate that we got to do all that in such a short period of time. And looking forward to, like you said, getting into things today. Before I do, obviously, want to address, the most important thing, right now, obviously, which is just want to send out the, all of our, prayers and every, just a bit of love to those who the families of those who, did not make it back from combat and from serving this great country. And know that, every life that went doing that service for this nation. We are beyond grateful and can never repay you or your loved ones for that. And just wanted to state that before we get into the show.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I echo exactly what what you just said, Scoops. I mean, we're so fortunate to live in such a great country. I think with everything going on, I know it can get crazy at times, but just in general, I mean, we're so lucky to be able to have the freedom to do what we want, what our hearts desire. So, I'm so grateful for all of our veterans out there, and happy Memorial Day to everybody out there. I hope you guys are all enjoying it. Hopefully you guys have the day off tomorrow, and you're able to enjoy with your family, friends, and just celebrate. Because honestly, we definitely don't want to take celebrations for granted, and so I'm definitely excited to be able to celebrate our veterans and celebrate Memorial Day like I hope everybody else is. So thank you, Scoops.
Absolutely. No, I, just again, thank you. Whether you've got, a loved one who passed in combat or any connection whatsoever, just wanted to really emphasize our gratitude from everybody at RMSN and K&K. I know that they all are in lockstep with me on those words. So just wanted to say thank you all for that. And may everybody, rest in eternal peace who's lost their lives serving this country. Transitioning from that, so we talked a little bit about the fact that I appeared on DBR the other day. Definitely, you were missed on there, by the way. But talk a little bit about something that I actually said. I usually, sometimes shows tend to start with that. Was this an overreaction or was it not an overreaction? And I want to get your take on something actually that I said, because I know that it definitely got some interesting reactions from the other people I was doing the show with. So the other day we were talking about the backups quarterback situation for the Broncos, and I spoke with Jody and Keith, and we were talking about Zach Wilson. We were talking about Jarrett Stidham, and I was bringing up the fact that it was being asked about who I thought was going to be the better starting quarterback or the better backup quarterback for you guys, the QB2. And for me, I was very emphatic on it being Jarrett Stidham, and I went on and I ultimately declared my personal opinion that Zach Wilson is the worst starting quarterback I've seen in the NFL. I've been watching the NFL since 2010, since Super Bowl 44, the Saints Colts Super Bowl, and all of that time I've watched a lot of different football games. I've not seen a more negative start for a starting quarterback, in my opinion, than Zach Wilson. Was I overreacting on that, or do you think that you would have a similar perspective?
I mean, I definitely don't think you're wrong, Scoops. I think Zach Wilson definitely, in particular, has not been very good. But again, where was he playing at? What was the situation? Like that's what I like to think of it. I think Zach Wilson's a bigger reclamation project than other people like to tend to believe. And I think that's why Denver took a chance on him. Again, he was with the Jets, New York Jets, right? That's a place and that's a destination where quarterbacks go to die, per se. And hopefully that narrative changes for that fan base and for that team. But with Zach Wilson, I think he comes to Denver and he's hoping, to kind of sort of revive his career. I've compared it to the Sam Darnold situation when he left, ended up going to San Francisco. And going for with one of the brighter minds in football, and that's Kyle Shanahan. And kind of, you look at that even a year later and look what he's done in Minnesota. He's got a pretty hefty deal for being a backup last year, going to Minnesota. Now he gets a chance to start somewhere, and word gets around the league that, hey, this guy's got something in the tank, and not necessarily what fans see on the field, but when you see in practice and all that stuff. I think that transpires and that gets around the league, and suddenly you're seeing a Sam Darnold-like quarterback he didn't start pretty much. I mean, I think he started one or two games last year for San Francisco down the stretch when Purdy and all the starters weren't playing. But now you're seeing a total turnaround. He's in a situation where he's in Minnesota now. He's competing for the starting quarterback job. So I think that's the hope and the best outcome you can get with Zach Wilson. The thing with Zach Wilson is he's very raw still. He's not got that chance to develop like some of these other quarterbacks have, and the Broncos give up very little to get a guy like Zach Wilson. So I don't think you're overreacting in a way at all. I mean, the numbers show it. He's not a very good quarterback right now, but again, he's not been in a great situation to be successful. And I think here in Denver, hopefully he'll get that. Hopefully he wants to see the field to get that because Denver desperately needs to start Bo Nix, I think, day one. But hopefully Zach Wilson can just kind of be that successful reclamation project without having to see the field. And I say that just in practice and him growing as a quarterback, IQ-wise, taking stuff underneath. Zach Wilson, and this is stuff that I heard from Broncos camp and, from a fans perspective and just kind of following the team. Zach Wilson, he has the arm talent, he has the upside, and I completely agree with that. What Zach Wilson doesn't have, in my opinion, is the stuff underneath. He's got to start taking stuff underneath. The big splashy play is not always going to be there for him. He's got to make sure that he's aware of that. And that's the thing that drove Sean Payton crazy last year with Russell Wilson. So that's why I don't think that Zach Wilson, although has a ton of upside, and Sean Payton may like his upside, he's got some growth to get there. So Jarrett Stidham, I think, is going to push him for that job. We'll see how Jarrett Stidham's going to do. Jarrett Stidham, I will say this, Jarrett Stidham should definitely have the upper hand of all these quarterbacks to possibly win the job. And I don't think it's competition between him and Bo Nix, by the way. But as far as being Bo Nix's backup, because he's already been in the Sean Payton system, been around Sean Payton for a year, Zach Wilson hasn't.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that I largely agree with not just what you said, but also your logic behind it. And I think also, and I was astonished because I was going off of what I had seen in terms of how poor my opinion was of Zach Wilson. And then I went and I actually looked. I looked, do the facts, the data from 2010 onward, bear me out. For the pass attempts that he has, he's the second worst quarterback with that many pass attempts, according to passer rating. And the only one who's worse is Blaine Gabbert. And last I checked, Blaine Gabbert didn't alienate and throw his defense under the bus in one of his first starts in the NFL. So, yeah, it's definitely, I agree, he's got upside. I agree that there's room to grow for him for sure. But I think I have to be more the question I have to ask when you say he has to think the things he has to work on is the stuff underneath. I think the stuff he has to work on is between his ears. I think the stuff that he has to work on is your ability to show that you can do that sort of quarterback. I don't want to say politics, but play that sort of role where you're rallying guys behind you that you are, have their support, and you're deferring the praise when things are going well, and you're willing to fall on the sword when they're not. That's what a lot of these guys are expected to do. And he basically has not shown the ability to really have learned that to this point. And that's obviously, plenty of guys can mature as they get older, and as they get humbled in one thing or another. But the question is, does he have the ability to do that? And we're about to find out, because obviously Coach Payton is not somebody who's going to take very well to that type of behavior.
Right. Real quick, Ryan, do you think that there's a good chance that Zach Wilson, do you think he's competing for the backup job, or is he start competing with Bo Nix for the starting job right now? As an outside perspective.
Yeah, I don't think he's competing with Bo Nix at all. And I mean, the other day, like I said, when we were asked about QB2, and I still said it would be Jarrett Stidham, I I would keep him as my QB3 if I'm keeping him at all. But even there, my QB3 is usually somebody. I mean, they're talked about usually as the clipboard holder. They're talked about usually as somebody who's there for the locker room, one thing or another. And my sort of there for the locker room guy, I would take about. I can think of 20 different players I would take before I would take Zach Wilson in that regard. So, again, that's something that they have to reconcile, and it could very well work out for them. I'm not saying that it can't. We've seen plenty of guys. We just saw Geno Smith in his year, I want to say 9 or 10 season, pop in a way that he had never before. So I am not in any way saying that he can't improve and he can't get closer to his ceiling, but the proof is going to be in what he's able to accomplish and what he's going to be able to show the critics and just everybody in the fans and otherwise. We were talking about Denver, so I'll stay in that regard for right now. The Denver Broncos this coming season, we all know that Kansas City Chiefs are the team that everybody's looking at right now for obvious reasons. There's questions about whether they have the GOAT at QB and whether they're a dynasty. So obviously that's the team that people are looking at. Next to Kansas City, who do you think poses the biggest threat to Denver this season? Could be either in the division or just across the conference.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a great question, Scoops. I think all the above, to be honest with you. The Broncos are in a situation, right now where they're still trying to build up the foundation. They're not really chasing in particular one team. Again, Kansas City would be the obvious choice if you had to pick a team because they're the team that's top of the division, the AFC West every single year. But I think I think they're right along there with the Raiders and the Chargers as far as a team that they just need more. I mean, they need to continue to build more, and just the AFC in general. That's such a tough, conference in general. So I think that Denver's just chasing all the above. How many teams is Denver penciled in to get wins against this year? Maybe Carolina. I mean, so that's just like, we'll see. There'll be some surprise wins in there too, but I think they're chasing all the above just because they're still building their roster up and they're not in a situation right now, at least in my opinion. I don't know that this team's a playoff team right now, and I think that I don't want to put those expectations on this team right now because I think Sean Payton, needs time to build this roster. I'm willing to give him some more time, and you have a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix who I want to see steps forward, and I want to see flashes from players to build off of going forward in the future. So I think this is more of a building season than anything. Once again, I know some fans don't want to hear that, but that's just, I think, the situation where we are with Denver right now. We shall see what they do. Maybe they surprise us and do make the playoffs. But I just say all the teams and above in the AFC are going to be, I think, a challenge for Denver going forward.
Absolutely, and I think also he's probably in. I don't want to say he's in the shadow of it because he was obviously in a different situation. He was drafted at a lower level, but I think also a good number of the starting quarterbacks or the drafted quarterbacks coming out this year, I think people are going to be looking at them with a shorter leash than they would have because they just saw, well, CJ Stroud was able to do it in his first season, but so I hope that he's not going to be looked at as similarly and they're not going to put the weight of the world on his shoulders right off the rip. I think maybe it helps that he's going to be in Denver, but who knows? Our friend Jody's coming in and says, cut Stidham, trade Williams. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not. Again, that's cutting Stidham. Okay, that's definitely a possibility, especially if Zach Wilson comes in and beats him out. Trading Javonte Williams, again, Denver's not going to get a ton for Javonte Williams. He hasn't been a 1,000-yard running back in his career yet, and he hasn't been the same running back for 2 years. So why would a team cut him if the Broncos are just going to release him? That's the thing we have to consider here. And he's a running back. Teams don't trade for running backs, and if they do, they don't give up very much at all. It's very rare that we see a running back get moved, and I think if Denver moves off of Javonte Williams, it'd be a release. My thing is, from a financial standpoint, he's still on his rookie contract, Javonte Williams is. So you moving off of him financially doesn't make a ton of sense because you're not really saving anything with the cap. So I think they would just probably try to keep Javonte more than anything just because of the cap situation. Like a P. Ryan, you're saving money. I think it's like $3 million you're saving if you cut him. So there's a logical reason to trade or to cut P. Ryan, but with Javonte, you're not saving. I don't even think you're saving $1 million off of that. So it's just, are you cutting him to save money? Are you cutting him just because? I mean, I think something would have to go wrong, or somebody would have to make a huge jump for Denver to move off of Javonte Williams. And we've seen how Sean Payton last year rode Javonte Williams, even though Javonte wasn't fully ready to go probably, but he still rode him for most of the season. So I think Sean Payton is telling us that, hey, I believe in Javonte Williams. There's something there with him. Just got to get him healthy.
I think he's the kind of guy, if you're trading Williams, to me, smells like the kind of guy who it would be one of those types of trades where you're trading Williams in a 7th for a 6th or something like that. And that his value has never really been lower. I feel like you're probably in a better position seeing if he can get a bit of a rebound this season. And then if you do believe Estime is your guy of the future, see if you can trade him while his value is high. I think trading him right now is probably the worst time to trade him when if a team believes that there's something there to kind of still unpack or get back from a couple of years ago, then why would Denver move him in the first place? And if they don't, then they're going to get nothing for him. And like you said, it's not like it's going to be a major financial help to do that. And I don't really think that this is not a team that seems to be super cap concerned when you're looking at what they're paying guys to not play for them. So, but we've got another comment here. Oh my gosh. Nikki says, Swifty scoops and Swifty Trevor. Nikki, I'm glad to have you on tonight. Thanks for joining. And probably the most predictable comment we'll have all night. But
hey, I'm not even in the comments section yet. I'm not even commenting. And we're already talking about Taylor Swift. We're 15 minutes into the podcast. So that's not on me. That's on Nicole. So, hey, if I'm not there, I know that Nicole will bring up Taylor Swift. So that's good. Thanks for having my back, Nicole.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised that it came up. I'm honestly a little bit surprised that it took 15 minutes into the show. But
right.
I think that Johnny says, or Jody says, the whole AFC North. Yeah, that is a really stacked division. And I think obviously Baltimore, we know what they're going to be. Pittsburgh, we don't know what they're going to be, but we expect that Russell Wilson's going to be something for them, some sort of an upgrade over what they've had recently with Pickett, Trubisky, et cetera, everyone since Big Ben retired. And then Cleveland, I feel like everybody says this, but Cleveland can't be so disappointing forever. Like at one of these points, this is going to coalesce. I mean, they were on the verge of having a run with Joe Flacco this past year, losing perhaps the best running back in the NFL. So I definitely agree the AFC North is going to be headaches for one another and for teams outside of that division as well. And Jody had also said trade Williams, and we talked about this for a second, but trade Williams because Estime will be your bell cow very soon. I do agree about him being the bell cow. I just question whether it's that necessary to trade Williams right now. I feel like if he is somebody who gets off to a hot start and then you want to capitalize on that, you can make moves later in the season. I just don't see a ton of motivation. If I'm going to trade somebody, there has to be a motivation for me to trade them. Either I'm getting a really good offer for it, or there's something that I need to get off, whether it's a contract or a personality issue. And we really haven't seen that with him. So I just see very little motivation for them right now to make that move.
Yeah, and again, you're banking. Again, this is where it comes back to my point on a running back's really going to have to emerge for Denver to be able to move a Javonte Williams caliber player. Remember when Denver drafted Javonte Williams, saving the second round of in 2021, so they moved up to get him. So there's talent there. Again, it's just can he recover from that injury? And Estime is a 5th round running back. We're not talking about them taking him in the 3rd, 4th round. He's got taken in the 5th round for a reason. I get the upside in him. I do like him as a running back, but I just want to be realistic, and I don't know if he's going to make that jump this year. If he's got to sit a year and then make that jump, that's possible. I think it's more of a P. Ryan thing than anything. If Estime is going to find his way onto the field, I think it's going to be because Denver got rid of Samaje Perine, not necessarily Javonte Williams. So maybe it's Javonte Williams and Estime together. Again, good luck stopping those two guys.
Agreed. And as you know, as somebody who's seen him in Washington go up in the NFC East, I definitely would rather, if I'm you guys, I definitely would rather keep Williams over Perine. Just not seeing a ton from him. He's the kind of guy who you can see it on any given night, perhaps, but as somebody that you're going to be putting a decent amount of stock into an offense that's trying to support a first-year quarterback, Perine's not somebody that I'd be willing to. I would bank more on Javonte Williams getting back to at least 80% of what he was before I would bank on Perine. But actually, since Jody being here, as long as he's here, why don't we use this as an opportunity to kind of segue over into some of our baseball talk? Because one of the first questions I've got was related to his team, the Houston Astros, who he's been not taking or not missing any opportunity to remind me how they've been coming back of late. So they've had some recent success. They obviously started out terribly, but they've been winning a good number of their recent games, and they are definitely looking closer to who we thought that they were supposed to be and who they've looked like since 7-8 years ago now. Do you think, from what you've seen and what you've seen recently, you think the Astros are going to come all the way back and win the AL West again? Or do you think that this is a sort of they're going to kind of come back to what we expected, but not come back to that extreme level?
I think they'll come back. I think that the thing to watch with Houston is, I think, again, they have the talent there. Teams get off the slow starts, pretty often in Major League Baseball. So I think for me, it's just more or less finding their groove, and I think they'll find their groove eventually. Again, you have the Mariners in that division. You have the Texas Rangers in that division. So you have teams definitely that you're competing with there, right? But again, I think that Houston, they've been there and done that, and they've done that for a long time now. And they built a team the right way. So I really respect that they were able to build that team and do it the right way. And I think that it's shown with the amount of progress and success they've had, long term wise. So I think Houston will definitely reemerge, and I would not be surprised to see them set up top of their division when it comes to, I think, the All-Star break or trade deadline. They better get their groove together, I think, in my opinion, though. If they don't, that might be a team where they may flip some guys in some deals if they're not in it. That's an aggressive front office, an aggressive team, and so I definitely think Houston will bounce back, though. I think they're too talented not to, in my opinion.
I agree on their talent level. I was not expecting them to start the way that they did, obviously. So I'm not sure if they'll bounce back as aggressively to the level where they'll finish the season where we might have thought that they would. But definitely, it just didn't. Even when they were, I think, 11 or 12 games under 500, a lot of people, including myself, were saying that it just didn't seem right that team was going to be that poor for that long. And obviously, they had a couple guys banged up due to injury. But even with that, they've always been one of the deeper teams. They've always been able to pull guys out of the minor league system, and you don't know who this guy is, and suddenly he's turning in quality at bats for them. And I think that that's going to be something that we're going to continue to see. Now, like you said, I'm not sure that we're going to see them as in the ALCS, winning the ALCS for whatever number of time it is the past 7 years. But I definitely don't think that they're the team that we saw New York beat in the first week either. I think that they're definitely a better team than they looked like then, and they're showing it now more recently. You actually mentioned the Rangers, obviously the defending world champions. Do you think that, based on, because both of those teams that were in the World Series, we got the Diamondbacks and we got the Rangers, both those teams are a little bit underperforming right now. They're both under 500. Do you think it's the Rangers or do you think the Diamondbacks? If you had to pick a team who you think is more likely to sort of get back to closer to where they were last season, which team you're looking at and saying, I think that this team might be a little bit underachieving right now and able to get back to being more formidable throughout the end of the season?
That's a great question, because honestly, you can make the argument that both teams could end up back there again. I'm gonna switch it up. I'm gonna go with the Diamondbacks. I think this is a team that's very young and very talented. I think that my opinion, they have a better chance at having more success long term, just with the prospects they have, and adding Jordan Montgomery this season. I think that just some of their signings that they've made in free agency and stuff like that is going to have to pay off. And I think that's the biggest thing with this team. They've done everything that they could, right, to build this roster up with the prospects that they have acquired over the years and draft and development that they've had. If their prospects can live up to their potential and be healthy, I think Arizona can be a team that's, again, we're talking about how Houston built their roster. I think the Diamondbacks roster could definitely be built in a similar way, and they could have just as much of success. I know that you have the Dodgers in the NL West, but you just never know. And I think that building with your farm system and with prospects is the better way to go, in my opinion, than just go out there and signing free agents. And it seems like that the Padres kind of went away from that philosophy for sure. And there's no guarantee the Dodgers are going to be as good, for however long they're going to be good for. You just never know with injuries and stuff like that. The future's unknown. We like to predict the future, but a lot of times it's unknown. So I think Arizona for sure is a team that I think could definitely be back there. I don't think it was just a fly in the pan type situation where they were just there for a year and that's it. They're done. I think this is a team that will have success and eventually will show up. Again, just one of those teams that unfortunately have gone on to a bad start.
No, absolutely. And it was funny because last year, if you look at the rosters in that division, it was like such a what could have been for like a New York Red Sox rivalry, because it felt like half the Rangers had been on the Yankees at one point, and half the Diamondbacks had been on the Red Sox at one point. Mike Hazen was up there. He was in the Red Sox front office for a while. Torey Lovullo was an assistant on the Red Sox for the longest time. So it was funny to kind of see how fans were sort of aligning based on that as well for the teams who weren't in the championship. But no, I think also the Rangers also just felt like they had, sometimes have that. You say that it just feels like their year, and the Rangers just kind of had that feeling last year where it just felt like it was going to be them for a good part of the season. Not that they necessarily were the runaway favorites, but they just had something that you couldn't put into words. And so I question whether, I think that now more than ever, at least in baseball, but really across multiple sports, it's kind of harder than ever to sort of maintain that magic for 2 years in a row. So I think that, and again, like you said, Montgomery is now playing in Arizona, who was in Texas last year, and he was arguably their most valuable starter down the stretch. So that was not an insignificant loss, especially to lose to the team that you just beat in the World Series.
Yep, absolutely.
But now that division, I think also the Diamondbacks, just the division that they're in, I think lends itself potentially to more of a window for the Diamondbacks than does the AL West. I just think that the Mariners are too good. I think that the Astros, again, they're already proving that they're not as bad as they started out the season. And even, I sound crazy for saying this, but there are days where Oakland's players, they are scrappy, they are competitive, and those are guys who, say what you will about their terrible ownership. John Fisher is a historically bad owner. I wouldn't be surprised if he becomes somebody who the league starts to decide we have to force the sale of this team, because that, to me, that's just how bad it's getting. But aside from the Anaheim Angels, and I'm sorry, Keith, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but aside from the Anaheim Angels, there are any number of those teams I think could at least go on a decent run and at least play spoiler if nothing else. Whereas NL West, I kind of don't have that same strong feeling. I mean, even the Dodgers, who it felt like everybody was giving the NL trophy to them before the season even started, and they've just had their worst losing streak in 5 years. So I would agree with you on saying Arizona as well.
Is there a world where? And sorry, I'll ask you this question real quick.
No, go for it.
Is there a world that Arizona, we have not seen their full potential yet with some of their prospects, because not all their prospects are even in the big leagues yet. Drew Jones, I believe, is one of their top prospects. I don't believe he's seen the field yet. So I was just wondering, is it possible that Texas right now is probably in a better situation to win and their windows now, but I don't think that, like, Arizona, while some of their moves may look like they're a win now team, we've not seen their prospects flash their full potential yet. And so that's why I say, like, Texas maybe now, because I think where their roster's built is built to win now. Arizona's, in a way, yes, is built to win now, but I think that we've not seen, again, their full potential of some of their bigger prospects yet. So in term, they may have a lot longer of a path of success than the Texas Rangers right now, where they have their players are a little bit older and they're more, I think, ready to win now with their rosters at. So I was just asking your perspective. Do you think that Arizona's roster is they have reached their full potential yet?
Arizona, I definitely don't think has. Now, again, if you're asking me long term, I definitely think Arizona is better set up for success than Texas. The question really just becomes, does that mean that is Texas still in the best position in the short term? Because that could also mean Arizona is also better positioned in the short term, depending on what you think of Texas. Now, I want to see a little bit more of what we're going to see at the major league level from guys like, obviously, Lawler's their top prospect. We haven't really seen what their what they're gonna look like when you have guys like Caccione and Barossa coming up as major league prospects. We just talked about guys like Drew Jones, etc. So I do agree there's some question marks there, but it kind of just depends on what question marks are you going to be rolling your dice on? Are you going to be rolling on these young guys coming up? Are you going to be rolling on these guys from last year, continuing that magic into another season? You're kind of gambling either way. It's just a question of which gamble you're more comfortable taking. And speaking of, we just mentioned him, and Keith Brugman is in the house. Good evening. He says, "Good evening to these fine. Good evening to yourself, Keith. I hope you had a wonderful weekend. Great to see you again. Obviously, I got to see you on Friday evening. That was a lot of fun, and appreciate you joining us tonight. And pardon me, looking forward to seeing what you've got for us on the show. You always have some very exciting and interesting questions, and looking forward to seeing what you've got for us. Going off of that, we just talked a little bit about the high end of the teams. We talked about Houston, who's been doing better. We talked about even guys who, even though they're struggling, they were in the World Series last year. Let's talk about unfortunately, the other side of Major League Baseball for a second. You're looking at the LA Dodgers, and as I mentioned, they're on a 5-game skid that is their worst since 2019. This is just this losing 5 games to a lot of teams is just like, oh, that's unfortunate, but we'll get back on track. This is not something that happens to a team, to the LA Dodgers. And this is a team that people, again, like I said, people were having this team run away with the NL championship. And right now, the record is still good, but right now we're not seeing it. So is this something that you're starting to see and that's starting to concern you at all? Or do you think it's just a blip on the radar? And even though it's outsized compared to their recent history, you're still not super concerned about how they're going to do down the line?
I mean, I think it's concerning anytime you go on a extensive losing streak, no doubt about it. But I think where we're at with the Dodgers, I think they still have a ton of talent. I think they're still the most talented team as of right now in the NL West. And so I still, again, like you said, their record, they still have the second best record in the National League. So I still think that they definitely, I want to say comfortable, but they're definitely fine right now. Will they be down the line? No, because another 5-game losing streak can definitely switch things up. But I think as of right now, I mean, I'm not too panicky right now. Definitely, you're starting to get a little bit worried on the worried meter. But I think that there's still a ton of talent there, and I think that talent will definitely take over. And I think some of this is also the NL West just hasn't caught up to them yet. I just think that's a lot of where we're at right now. Like you say, you're looking at the Giants. I mean, 27-27, Padres 28-28, and Arizona 25-28. Just a lot of those teams around them just haven't made that jump yet, and they've not gotten off to a good start so far. So I think once those teams, or maybe one of those teams, or all three, honestly could as well. Once they start taking advantage of their opportunities and start winning games and going on winning streaks, I think you may be talking about a different situation. But if the NL West continues on the path that's going right now, I don't think you really got to worry about what the Dodgers are doing right now, just because of the rest of the talent in the NL West and what these teams are performing like right now.
I think some of the discussions about concern or one thing or another are because, and we talked about this before the season, everybody was just so in love with the signings of Ohtani and Yamamoto. Again, 2 elite talents, 2 players I absolutely love watching. I think that they were fantastic. They were fantastic acquisitions for LA, and they were both guys that I wanted to see going to New York. That being said, I think that it was a classic example of, especially in a big market, falling in love with these acquisitions and everybody believing, oh, they're now not just the team to beat, but they're almost a shoo-in to at least win the National League, as if teams like Atlanta didn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. I think that some of that played into it as well. And I think that some of the quote unquote, whether you want to call it concern or worry, one thing or another, I also think some of that is because of the hype that had been so built up for the Dodgers, that any chance that they have to look quote unquote human or mortal is going to be outsized as well, because the expectations were outsized. I think that the negative publicity when they have one struggle, like every team does. Even the 1998 Yankees, the greatest team ever, had struggles throughout the season. So it was just, I think that it kind of was overdone on both sides. I think that the concern is outsized, but I think it was a reaction to the fact that the hype and the sort of expectations that were put on this team. And I think the expectations is too mild of a word. I think those kind of play off one another. Jody says Astros 3.5 back and play Seattle for a 3-game series starting tomorrow. That should be a good series. I don't know offhand where that's at. I don't know if it's in Seattle or in Houston, but yeah, no, Jody, like we talked about, it's as much as I would have loved to see it last for a little bit longer. It was just not, your boys were not going to stay down for too long. Trevor, it looked like you were going to say something there. I don't want to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say the series is in Seattle. So
thank you. Yeah, so that's definitely a more, I keep wanting to call it Safeco Field. I think it's T-Mobile Stadium or something now, but that's definitely one of the more pitching-friendly parks in Major League Baseball. So that'll be a fascinating sort of benchmark, if you want to call it, or rain gauge, however you want to phrase it, to see where they're at from that standpoint. Obviously it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't have great offensive production there, but pitching in a park like that should be interesting to kind of evaluate where at least that part of their game is at in particular. Keith says, is the inevitable matchup Boston versus Dallas for the NBA championship, and is that a good matchup for the popularity of the league? You go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about Dallas team that's got 2 stars, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. I think that's good for the league. I think the NBA right now, and I don't know if we'll get into it this episode, but with the CBA, the new CBA that's in place now, there's aprions for these teams and tax aprions, and I think the NBA, everyone wants to say, well, they want the bigger cities, they want New York, they want Boston, and the NBA Finals. Actually, I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's more one of the more spread out leagues of all the leagues, and that's Major League Baseball, NFL, whatever, what you have it. I think NBA is one of those more spread out leagues where you're starting to see some of these smaller markets, emerge as, a real contender. Look at the Nuggets, and Dallas is one of those teams that when they re-signed Kyrie Irving, when they traded for Kyrie Irving, everybody was like, why are they trading for Kyrie Irving? How much is that really going to help their team? They need defense, blah, blah, blah. And look where they're at. I mean, they're in the Western Conference Finals. They have a 2-0 lead on the Minnesota Timberwolves, a team that I thought would put up more of a fight. And right now they're just looking like a team that's not there, and they definitely don't have the energy to put up with the Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. So I think Dallas is in a Boston series, I think would definitely be interesting. I still think Boston has the best starting 5 in the NBA when they're fully healthy. That's the thing is, though, is Porzingis. How healthy is Porzingis? And again, I say how healthy, but all these players are dinged up at some point in time where we're at. How late we are in the season. But that's the best. That's the thing for me. And I think the NBA. I think the NBA is going to be fine, just regardless of who's in the finals. And I don't think that they're trying to stir the pot one way or the other when it comes to one team are they favoring to be there, one team is not. If you want an example, look at the Los Angeles Lakers. They've not been very good for a couple years now, and that's because with the new CBA and its restrictions, with the tax aprions and the amount of draft picks you can trade and the cap that they're at right now, it's really hard for the Lakers to get back to being a winnable team right now, right? And having that sustained success that's we're used to in years past. So I definitely don't think that the popularity will matter. I think in the NBA Finals, I think these teams will put on the show, whatever, if it's Minnesota, if it's Boston against Dallas, or if it's whoever it's going to be, they'll put on the show. And most people will watch the NBA Finals, regardless, because it's such a big event.
I think you made a good distinction at the very beginning there between the different leagues, because again, we saw last year, and people were saying, "Oh, you talked about MLB." People were saying, "Oh, I'd love to see some new teams in there." And then the Rangers Diamondbacks series was one of the most poorly viewed World Series in recent times. I don't remember the exact numbers on it. I just remember that was the case. So I think it does help. It might help a little bit that Boston is, the Boston Lakers and all of that, but it has not just that team and all of that, but it's got, like you said, it's got Luka Doncic, who's not only one of the biggest stars, but he's also one of the more polarizing players in the league. He's not one of those guys who is almost pretty universally loved or at least respected. This is somebody who's got a very polarizing following. You've got now Kyrie Irving in there, who a lot of people are saying is kind of, I don't want to use the phrase growing up, but they're seeing that there's sort of a different character in his on a positive note that's coming out in Dallas and sort of really embracing that role. So, and kind of being that Robin to the Batman that is Luka, which a lot of people didn't expect that to gel well, but it seems like it is. So I think there's a lot of interesting storylines that'll come out, and not just the market size necessarily, but I think also the storylines that come out of different series helps a lot. And I think that creates a really strong one. And of course, the fact that Kyrie's going up against the team that he left in Boston, because there was obviously a bunch of controversy and consternation regarding all that. But I mean, like you said, sorry, New York Knicks, not everybody wants to play in New York. Sorry, LA Clippers, not everybody wants or Lakers, not everybody wants to play in LA. So, and I think in that league in particular, in the NBA, you've got, I mean, we just had Donovan Mitchell go to Cleveland, and we've had guys go to, we just had Damian Lillard for a little while, after a little while ended up, he started out in Portland, obviously, but then he didn't exactly go to the biggest market team either. So I agree with you that that's probably one of the places where market size is not, I wouldn't say less important, but there are other factors I think that might play a role that don't play as much of a role in other leagues. I agree with you there.
I want to give a score update right now. Actually,
Go for it.
73-77 Dallas. So Luka and Kyrie are leading the way. Luka's got 21 points in 26 minutes, and Kyrie's got 17 points in 27 minutes. So definitely those two are the seal of the show. And I want to add a little bit onto that, Scoop. The NBA, the CBA now, it favors teams that have less stars. So Dallas has 2 stars right now on their roster, right? Kyrie, Luka, but it's the other players that you surrounding them with, the PJ Washingtons of the world. I mean, look at what Dallas did at the trade deadline; they were very aggressive, and so the NBA, where the CBA is right now, how it's structured is you have a couple stars, and then you got to surround those stars with good players, right? And you got to surround those stars to even out the team, and that's where the Nuggets are at right now. Is you have guys that are on 3 max contracts, and so that's restricting them and what they can do off the bench. Where meanwhile, a Dallas team, they have 2 stars they're paying max deals to. They're going to be able to balance their roster out better. Hence, those guys don't got to play as much, and they don't got to, you don't got to see a heavy amount of minutes. So I think where the CBA is right now, it's definitely favoring those teams that have 2 stars and allowing those teams to have to be creative in how they build around those stars.
Yeah, the creativity part of it, I think, is really, and it goes along well to something I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Denver. I wanted to ask you about them, but before we do that, I'm going to get to Keith's question. He says, your conversation makes me think back to a different reality where Kyrie and LeBron stayed together in Cleveland. What would have been possible? You want to field this one first?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I think Kyrie wanted out of Cleveland, so I think stars, while the CBA right now, and again, different scenarios. They had Kevin Love at the time as well, and he's making pretty decent money. Kyrie wanted out of Cleveland. I don't think he wanted to be under LeBron's shadow anymore. So I think that I don't think it would have changed the landscape of that happening. But I think that the new CBA right now, I could tell you that the Golden State Warriors wouldn't have been the Golden State Warriors, and that was a team that one of the most dominant teams that we've seen in the NBA history. But with this new CBA, that's not happening. With the Kevin Durant's and Steph Curry's and Klay Thompson's, Draymond Green's of the world, that's not happening with this new CBA, and that's why teams are having to adjust to that. So the Kyrie thing, no, I think it still would have happened. I still think he would have left because I don't think he wanted to be under LeBron's shadow anymore. And I'm glad that in a way that he did, because the Cavs were pretty dominant when they did have Kyrie.
I think also the element of that I want to sort of add on to what you said is, not only did he not want to play as a second fiddle to LeBron, but I think the transition that he took, going to Boston, having those issues, going to Boston, falling on his face, and then going, to this sort of, I think he had to go through some of those things. I think he had to have some of those self-inflicted wounds. I think some of that allowed him to somewhat mature as at least, or I don't know if I would say a person, a player, or both, but I think he had to go through some of that. And I think that LeBron almost would have, quote unquote, protected him from that. And I question whether this same level of growth and the same level of sort of that maturity process is people are saying have happened. I question whether that would have had the same effect or been able to manifest the same way if he stayed in Cleveland with LeBron, because I almost feel like LeBron may have not inhibited that, but I feel like he would have prevented him from having to go through those things, or helped him not have to go through those things. And I question whether this, because sometimes, again, I mean, we both know this. Sometimes growth is going through, the crappy stuff, even if it's self-inflicted, and coming out the other side. So I wonder if that's a factor as well. Keith says Kyrie wanted out to be his own guy. He's not playing second to Luka anyway. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say yes, and I agree with you, Keith, on that one. But again, being under LeBron's shadow is there's a difference. I mean, in that, I mean, LeBron was the face of the NBA for many years. I mean, that's why I think Kyrie wanted out to be his own guy. He was his own guy in Boston for the longest time, and then they drafted Jason Tatum, and all these other guys kind of came along when Kyrie got to Boston. So he was his own guy for a little while. Then he went over to Brooklyn and teamed up with KD and such and companies. So I think Kyrie wanted to find out how to be his own guy and be his team. It didn't work, and he found a counterpart with Luka, which again, people were not on board with that because those are guys that they thought the ball had to be in their hands a lot of the times for it to be successful. So how are you able to evenly distribute the ball when both guys have to have the balls in their hands, be the primarily ball handler? So that's the thing, and I think they'll just give credit to Kyrie and Luka for finding that balance. I think Kyrie's just maturing as a player. That's important here, and I want to give him credit for that, for finally, for him maturing and finally getting to this point where he's maybe going to be back into the finals without LeBron James being that guy. Now it's Luka being the guy, but it's a different story between Luka and LeBron. He's not LeBron's shadow. LeBron, he ain't gonna be the only reason, for him getting to the NBA Finals. Is gonna be because LeBron James. Kyrie's gonna have to put in the work to do so as well. Without Luka, Kyrie isn't gonna be the same guy. Without Kyrie, or without Kyrie, Luka's ain't gonna be the same way. So these guys just think Luka and Kyrie have just done such a great job at balancing each other out and giving them credit. And I think Kyrie learned his lesson, and I think he's maturing as a player, which I think, again, give him credit for that, because he did not have to do this. So, and some players sometimes they never mature, or they mature when it's too late. Kyrie made adjustments when he needed to make adjustments. So, I'll leave it at that. And I think that's awesome for Dallas fans and for Kyrie and for Luka.
I think Brooklyn in particular, you can argue for a good period of that time, because Kevin Durant didn't play for an extended period of time. You can argue that he was the number one guy in Brooklyn for a good period of time, and that turned into an unmitigated disaster of epic proportions. So looking at just how that unfolded, I mean, we know the infamous, the whole, we're all going to be coaches, or whatever the line was in that press conference, or, everyone's going to be a bit of a coach. And I always have a bit of an issue comparing. I mean, again, I've said in the past on, I don't remember what show, but I've said in the past that if I'm asked, who's, for lack of a better term, the GOAT, I think it's a little more complicated than that, but who's the GOAT? Like I would say that would be LeBron. And in saying that, it's hard for me to put sort of a comparison situation with, even if it's not him being compared, it's a comparison that involves him with the sort of LeBron Kyrie situation. But I mean, we're looking at that Brooklyn situation that he was dealing with where Kyrie's got this whole, I don't even know what you would say, this sort of extra stuff that was going on off the field with whatever the drug was that he was trying, or whatever it was, the stuff that he was doing in the locker room. And, Ben Simmons, they picked up Ben Simmons to try and help him out. And Ben Simmons is like Santa Claus. I mean, everybody loves him, but does he even exist? So, I think that those were all factors. And then Keith says, in the NFL, a team that can get their best offensive into the matchup they want can dictate a game. Who is that player on the Broncos and Eagles that you revolve your scheme around specifically? Go ahead, boss.
Ooh, I want to think about this one. Currently, I mean, I'm going to say this is tough. Offensively, I'm going to say Marvin Mims. I mean, I think this is a guy that you're hoping the very the very most if you maximize Marvin Mims, you get him to run his routes more crisp, and he's able to learn that. Maybe you're talking about another Tyreek Hill kind of player, and you can revolve your offense around that a little bit more. Does it fit with Bo Nix can do? I mean, I'm not sure, per se, but I think that can definitely help. And if he can contribute like a Tyreek Hill, that would be a guy that I would love to see, kind of contribute and be not just be a Pro Bowler as far as a kick returner and on special teams, but be a Pro Bowler as far as on offense and really maximize his potential. And I think he's got getaway speed. It's just the route running, can he figure that out and get that down? And can he run a route over the middle of the field? And do it crisp? To where he can get away from a defender. I think he's got the speed to do so, but it's just how can he more so develop his game, and maybe you can get that Tyreek Hill kind of player like Marvin Mims. Again, I know I'm throwing Tyreek Hill. Those Tyreek Hills don't come around that often, and I'm throwing that name out there, but I do think Marvin Mims has that kind of potential if he can fully reach it.
Marvin Mims is continually coming up when I do Denver Broncos related research. He's continually coming up as somebody that people expect to break out this year or believe could sort of take another leap to another level this season. And if that happens, I'm going to be looking forward to watching that and then you've got the chemistry that Nix has with Troy Franklin. All of a sudden, you put up those two guys as reliable receivers. That becomes a very potent offense. And for me, I would have to say, I mean, the obvious one that jumps out to me is Jalen Hurts, just because, again, he does things that other QBs cannot do. But if I'm going to go beyond that, I'm going to go Saquon. And the reason I'm going to go Saquon is because, well, first off, obviously he's not somebody who was on the team last year. But this is going to be, and I know that the offensive line is going to look a little bit different because we lost Kelsey. But going back this season, we've still got Mailata, we've still got Johnson, et cetera, et cetera. Those types of players on your offensive line, this is not that he has consistently had a terrible offensive line and not a very good quarterback in his backfield. So we keep hearing, he gets banged up all the time. Yeah, because his guys in front of him don't know how to block and because his quarterback doesn't help him at all. So now he's got a quarterback who's at least more competent than Daniel Jones. And we've got an offensive line that's going to be the second he steps on the field, is going to be the best one he's ever had. So I think that it's going to allow him to be, yes, he'll still be probably the bell cow back, but he's going to be put into a situation where he can be part of something better, and he's not going to be the focal point of an offense. Because in this day and age, especially if your O-line sucks, being a running back being the focal point of an offense, you're asking to get the guy beat up and injured.
Yeah. Nick, he's got another one.
Keith's last one. The player you didn't like when you were younger, but now have mad respect for. Go ahead, because I'm going to take a second to think about this. I think this is an all sports question. I can't tell though.
Yeah. Man. That I don't know. There's a couple players that it's kind of the opposite question for me. I don't know, Scoops. Do you have a guy named? I need to think for a little bit. That's a great question, Keith.
The first one that's coming to my mind, I don't know if I would say if it was younger because it's a very recent transition for me, but I'll admit that I was wrong. I thought that Marcus Stroman coming over to New York was going to be an absolute just cultural just downplay or downshift, and it seems like it's been anything but. I've seen very few players who seem to genuinely love and have wanted solely to come to New York to play in New York for the Yankees like he has. He was clearly authentically really wanting to be a Yankee and apparently for a decent period of time. Every time I listened to an interview with him, I think it was yesterday, and he just talks about how much he's building up his relationships with other guys on the team, not just the obvious ones like Judge, but other guys on the team. And he just feels like he's bringing, he's got a little bit of an attitude sometimes, but maybe that's what New York needed, because this is a team this year that their chemistry and their culture seems like it's taken a step forward. In spite of the guys that I thought that they were bringing in who were red flags, maybe they needed a little bit of attitude, a little bit of swagger, a little bit of, for lack of a better word, cockiness, because from what I've seen from Marcus Stroman, all I'm seeing is a guy who loves the game, loves his craft, wants, the spotlight, wants to be, they're out there in the biggest moments, sweating it out. And, every time I listen to him speak, I get more fired up. So I'm going to go with Marcus Stroman.
Yeah, I'm going to go Kobe Bryant. Again,
Good one.
RIP to
Good one.
Kobe Bryant. He's such a fantastic player. I just think that when I was younger, I didn't again I admire his game, but obviously I hated him when he played in my Denver Nuggets in the playoffs and knocked us
Right.
out, a good amount of times. But no, I mean, again, one of the greatest to ever do it. And what I liked about Kobe is he didn't have to team up with all stars. They came to him. He was such a great teammate. He picked up his guys around him. He was harsh on the guys he needed to be harsh on. And he just led. He just had that leadership quality that you're looking for in an NBA player, and just you're looking for a player in general. So I've got so much respect for Kobe now, and I grew to respect him more and more as time went on. It's just when you're younger and you're watching those games against the Denver Nuggets, and you have the Carmelo Anthony era in Denver, it's so hard to respect a guy that, like, I don't know, he just keeps hitting these amazing shots and knocking your team out of the playoffs, and just so hard to beat. Definitely a Hall of Famer, definitely one of the top players that I've ever seen play, and just respect for him just all the way around, not just from the on the court standpoint, but just just the type of person he was. Just seemed like more of a stand up person, and always put his arm around guys when they needed to. And playing in LA, it's not easy, right? It's not easy at all. And he stuck it out. He played for one team his whole career. And that's and you just don't find those type of players that often. So a lot of respect for Kobe Bryant. And again, rest in peace. You are definitely missed.
That's a great way to put it. I mean, there's very few guys who, like, it's a joke that people make, but it's very true. There's very few guys who, kids are growing up 7, 8, 9 years old, and they're throwing, they're seeing if they can make a paper basket into a trash can, and they're yelling Kobe as they're taking the shot. Like, he's impacted far more than just the average the diehard basketball fans. For Keith, it's Tim Brown, and Jody said, I think Jody said, he says, I so badly want to say MPJ. I think that's a Michael Porter Jr. And then he has series like he did versus Minnesota, and I can't get fully behind him. Yeah, again, I can't say that I really watched that much of that series, so I don't really have a ton to comment on that.
Well, I think Jody got confused on our question that we asked. We haven't talked Nuggets yet.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
No,
I've got a Nuggets question coming up in a second here, but Jody says Kobe. Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good one as well. I definitely learned some things about him after he passed away that I didn't know prior to, and I in spite of obviously what happened in 2020, I definitely wish that I had more followed him and developed more of a respect for who he was as a player when I was younger, because I wasn't really following basketball a ton, and I wasn't a Kobe fan. Again, that was mostly just because it was sort of like the rivalry at the time was LeBron versus Kobe. And I mean, obviously, I'm clearly a LeBron guy. But that being said, it's just again, there's legitimate arguments to be made. If anybody has an argument to be made as the quote unquote GOAT, and it's not MJ or LeBron, the only one who even has a prayer of an argument, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinions, is Kobe. And the fact that you're even making that a conversation, like, may not be a long one for some people, but the fact that you're even making that a conversation shows how much you impacted the game, not just on the court, but the game around the world. And that being said, I'm going to go to Jody's comment up here real quick, just because it's something I want to respond to really quickly. He says the only thing James is the GOAT at is floppy. And I'm going to just respond to this really quickly, because what we've heard repeatedly, and the main argument that I hear is, like you just said, he had to team up with other guys. Okay, then why did the Suns, great sort of a super team, whatever, why did that fail miserably? Why did the Brooklyn Nets fail miserably? People are acting like just because you bring elite talent together, that almost guarantees you're going to win rings. So we've seen several examples, in fact, more examples than not, of it absolutely blowing up in teams' faces and people's faces. LeBron, each time he quote unquote built a team, he brought in guys. He took losing cultures in LA and Cleveland and or sorry, in LA and Cleveland, he took losing cultures and brought them to not just relevance, brought them to some of the best almost overnight, and did it with an entire new roster of players, and kind of develop that chemistry on the fly. So you can look at it as he quote unquote built teams, or however you want to say it. But in my mind, I'm looking at somebody who went to these were two of the worst teams in the league at the time that he went there, and he coalesced this new group of talent that came in, whether it was young or old, typically more veteran guys, and turned them into, again, he won a ring in Cleveland, he won rings in Miami, and he won a ring in LA. So yeah, you can, if you want to, you can make the argument that that he built these teams. But if that's the case, then why aren't all these other teams who are trying to do it? Why aren't they having the same success? Why are the ones that are having success, with the exception of Golden State, but that was mostly that was Durant going to a core that already was pretty good. Why are all these other teams failing, and why is LeBron successful every single time?
Yeah, and I think that's there's many different directions you can go with that. I think definitely you got to have that leadership, right? You're just talking about the Suns. Who's the leader? Who is a Booker? Is a KD? KD's never been a vocal leader. He's been more of a guy that just shows you with his play that he's leader, right? He's not really been a local or a vocal leader. LeBron's always been a vocal leader, and that's why I think he's had success. Also, I think it's different eras, right? With Miami was a different era. He created the big three, and then teams started following that same pattern, and it didn't actually obviously didn't work out for every single team that tried to do it. And then I argue with you and agree with you, Scoops, on LeBron James, because I have respect for LeBron, what he did in Miami, because he went there, he won, he took advantage of a CBA that wasn't well in place, and he did well with that, right? He ended up you know creating that big three, but he learned how to win. In Cleveland by himself, he wasn't going to learn how to win. And so he went to Miami, learned how to win, and then took that back home to Cleveland and won a championship, for Cleveland. And who knows when the next time the Cleveland Cavaliers are going to win a championship. So I respect for him doing that, per se. That'll be, I think, when we look back at LeBron's legacy, that is what I'll have respect for him the most, is he came back into Cleveland, built that team up into a team that he didn't have to, right? And he learned how to win and brought that over and that winning culture back over to Cleveland, and they ended up winning an NBA championship when he didn't have to do that.
Yeah, and that wasn't just, I mean, as we both know, that wasn't just, the Cavaliers' first championship. That wasn't just breaking Cavaliers drought. That was a city-wide thing. That was a citywide curse that he went back, and I don't want to say single-handedly broke, but he definitely was at the forefront of what ultimately led to that happening. So, yeah, and again, somebody else who just has had an impact on far more than just the game of basketball. I'm going to use that as a segue to ask one final question, because I don't want to keep people too far past the buzzer here. But we talked about the Denver Nuggets as they just wrapped up their series with the Minnesota Timberwolves. Going forward to this season, or this offseason, and next year into 2025. What you just saw, they just went to Game 7. Obviously, they lost. They had a couple of really good games, and they had a couple of real clunkers in that series. What do you think, as someone who watches the Nuggets, someone who's followed them, and someone who is obviously going to continue to follow them going forward as a fan, what do you think that they need to do? Give me even just one move, either something that you would add, somebody that you would retain who you could lose but you want to retain, or someone who you'd move on from this offseason that you think would, if this came again to a Game 7 next year, you'd win that game.
Yeah, I think the biggest question for me is, what are they going to do with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, KCP? He's going to be a free agent this offseason. He has a player option for $15 million around there. So I think he's going to decline that. I think he's going to get paid a little bit more. How are the Nuggets going to approach that? Because again, you will need to approach that in a way where you're going to have to make a couple trades before free agency and try to get underneath that second tax apron, because you definitely don't want to get into that second tax apron. I don't think a lot of teams do with the restrictions that are currently on it. But I think they're going to have to try to retain KCP, because there's not a lot of options that are going to be as great of a fit as KCP is on the Denver Nuggets. He's a 3-and-D guy, right? Shoots 3-pointers at elite level at his best, and then he's guarding the best guard on the other team. So it's hard to replace that. And I don't think Christian Braun can be that guy And I don't think he's proven to be that guy yet. I know that the Nuggets, they had a presser end of the season press conference the other day, and they talked about Christian Brown as, okay, maybe this is a guy that could possibly sneak in the starting lineup and replace a guy like KCP. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think you're going to have to make a couple trades that is going to allow you to have the money to re-sign KCP and still get underneath that second tax apron. And if they do that, then that would be my number one priority this offseason is getting KCP back, trying to finding a way to re-sign him, keep your starting five together, because you were up by 20 in the second half and you left that lead. You blew that lead because this team didn't have the energy to continue forward because you didn't have a bench. So after that, resigning KCP is my number one priority for the Denver Nuggets this offseason. After that, it's how can you get a Bruce Brown caliber player on your bench? That is what this team needed. They desperately miss Bruce Brown and Jeff Green to a degree this season. How can you find a way to acquire a guy like that? That's going to be, I think, the biggest mystery is how can you make your bench better? You're going to have to make a couple moves. Reggie Jackson's got a player option as well. If he accepts that, are you going to trade him? Zeke Naji, he's going to be making around $8 million this coming season. Is that a guy that you want to keep around, knowing that he barely seen the floor this last year and he's not progressed in a way where you want him to progress into? So Calvin Booth, the Denver Nuggets general manager, is going to have a long off season, and it's going to be an off season where he's going to have to make difficult decisions. And one thing I don't want them to do is give up on the starting five. And I think if you let KCP go, in a way, you're giving up on that starting five. And I definitely want to be concerned, but I don't want to panic. I don't think Denver Nuggets fans should panic at all. You were a half away from advancing and going to the Western Conference Finals, which in a lot of people's minds, including my own, I think you had a really good shot at this team being back-to-back NBA champions if they do get past Minnesota, because that Minnesota team is very good. Give Dallas credit where credit's due. They are playing great. We will never know how that series will pan out this season because, of course, Denver got eliminated. But definitely a lot of questions for a team that just won an NBA championship a year ago, trying to construct this roster, be creative, and also stay underneath that second tax apron, which a lot of teams do not want to be around or at all because of the restrictions.
Yeah, that's one thing I do enjoy about the NBA is imagine a few years ago saying that an important thing for your offseason would be retaining Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. This is a guy who went from the bench in LA a few years ago who was averaging under 25 minutes a game, and now this is a guy who he was almost an automatic bucket from the free throw line this year, shooting basically 90%, and then he's averaging about 32 minutes a game for you guys. So I that's one thing I do enjoy about the NBA is how much I think that perhaps is the one league where your depth matters in every sport, but they can play about as significant of an impact in NBA. I would argue that goes toe to toe with any sport.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to add to the priority list, Scoops, is this Denver Nuggets team, they need to try to protect Nikola Jokic a little bit more. I think that they've relied upon him so much, and that's great to do. He's the MVP, right, of the NBA, and he's your best player, and it's not even close. But
Right.
you're gonna have to find someone that can come in and give you meaningful minutes when Nikola Jokic is not on the floor. You gotta have to find ways to give him a break a little bit more. You can't play, he can't play the amount of games he played this last season and still play 40 minutes a night in the NBA playoffs and expect him to stay healthy. Continuing on as he's getting older, you're gonna have to find a center that's gonna be able to give you some minutes and give Nikola Jokic a break as he's moving forward, into his prime years here coming up. So you want to try to keep him as healthy and as fresh as possible while him still being dominant. You're going to have to find a viable backup center, and again, that's what comes into the importance of you staying underneath that second tax apron, because if you go over that tax apron, you're restricted to minimum contracts, and I don't know if there's a lot of minimum centers that you're going to be able to play meaningful minutes behind Nikola Jokic. So it's very important that Denver either retains KCP, gets flexibility. You can move to Zeke Naji or Reggie Jackson, retain KCP, and then still have the taxpayers mid-level exception to go out there and get a backup center that can play meaningful minutes for you and give Nikola Jokic a much-needed break in where he needs to be. So again, I guess that goes in with upgrading your bench. Where I think at this team this year, you've seen a lot of rookies, and they went more to the draft process wise, where you're drafting and developing guys off the bench and hoping that they will succeed instead of going after minimum contracts. So I think that Denver this year, I looked for them to add a couple more veterans to this team, and not just go more the rookie route as they did this past season off the bench.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, the CBA and all of those, unique sort of idiosyncrasies that it comes with. Obviously, those are very unique situations that they'll have to figure out, because obviously those are not the type of thing that you see usually in other CBAs. I don't want to, I hate that we have to wrap this up, but we are going a little bit over right now, and I want to just say thank you to everybody who came on tonight, especially those who are still staying with us a little bit past the buzzer. And most of all, Trevor, thank you so much for joining on tonight. Had a lot of great discussions, had a lot of fun talking about myriad different topics, and hopefully we can get you back on here soon.
Yeah, absolutely, Scoops. I really appreciate it. I love being on here with you. Any chance we get to talk sports and talk with your great fans. And again, thank you. Huge shout out to everybody in the posse here. Like we call it Denver Bronco Roundup, the posse. We have the Scoops posse here on his show tonight. I just want to thank everybody for being fantastic, always supporting Scoops. Scoops, you're one of the best sports minds I know, and just so knowledgeable and fantastic. Words can't describe how great you are, man, and just keep grinding, man. You're continuing to grow each and every day, and you're growing a great fan base over here. You have a great amount of listeners over here, and I'm proud and honored to be able to join, and just thank you for having me. And we will definitely be doing more shows together for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you so much, and really appreciate the kind words. And again, as I said to everybody, have a blessed Memorial Day. And we will see you again, 9 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Mountain, next Sunday. Settle the Scoops once again. Same scoop time, same scoop channels. Scoop out.